Hey fam, I want you to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications. Last week, we told you about a new Pew Poll, Race in America 2019, which found that the public has negative views of the country's racial progress. And more than half say Donald Trump has made race relations worse. But there was some more data I want to explore. So check this out. Here are the percentages of people who said people acted like they were suspicious of them. Whites, 25%, Asians, 35%, Hispanics, 37%, blacks, 65%. No other group was higher than 35%, higher than 40%. African Americans were at 65%. The percentage of people who say that people acted like they thought they weren't smart. Whites, 26%, Asians, 39%, Hispanics, 48%, blacks, 60%. Now check this out. The percentage of people saying that they have been unfairly stopped by police. Whites, 9%. Asians, 16%. Hispanics, 19%. African Americans, 44%. Shireen, what does this say, what it means to be black in America when you see these numbers?
Well, let's just be clear. Like, if you understand this president who has been actually naming himself a white nationalist, we understand why this problem exists. Also, we understand that in this country, the least respected is actually Black Americans in this country, second to Native Americans. And when we talk about these issues, even now as we're talking about the presidency, there are so many people trying to tell Black and brown people who to vote for, and every person they're suggesting is a white male. And that is part of the narrative in this country that we don't have, that we're not supposed to have say, but people can treat us differently any way they want to, including telling us who to vote for. And that's why we ended up with this president in the first place. And we now have what has been an increase in hate crimes because of this exact same thing. This study is just telling us water is wet. Right, that we already knew as African Americans and Black Americans in this country that we were being discriminated against. And I try to explain to people, no matter what you're talking about, and even including income inequality, no matter what status that Black Americans are in, they still face racism. So the concept that somehow we're going to even this out with income inequality is a fundamental flaw in all of this conversation. But the key to this is we now know we have that information. What are we going to do about it? Are we going to change the systems that we currently have in place, or are we not? Because the criminal justice system, as we just saw with what you just told us, what we just shared about the Mueller report, gives the benefit of the doubt to every white male, even when they're doing criminal acts, except for Black people and Black men in particular.
Alexis, again, when you look at this data, I mean, it speaks volumes to one particular group that is under attack more than any other. When you see those huge gaps between African Americans and everybody else, this is what people have to understand what 400 years of racial strife in America has all about. That even if you are Asian or Latino, you still not Black.
Absolutely. And I think, again, everybody has their different struggles, so I'm not one to downplay the struggles of people of different races, such as Asian or Hispanic. But this information that you presented is not surprising at all. I mean, like you said, there's a history there. And the history not only speaks to how Black people were treated, but also speaks to how Black people are represented. So when we talk about people thinking Black people aren't smart or thinking that they're guilty of a crime, we have to look at the history of what the narrative has been via movies, via minstrelsies, if we're talking history, via just the way that Black people are portrayed. We're portrayed to be unintelligent. You know, how many times they're usually goofy or dumb, or so that type of archetype. So that creates a narrative. And all of these other political people making comments about Black people, assuming that Black people are criminals, assuming that Black people aren't intelligent, when in fact, which isn't even the truth, because there's a high percentage of Black people who are in colleges and other institutions. So it's like, again, we can have all this data that says Black people are doing all of these great things, but what's hard to control is the narrative that's been embedded into American culture since the beginning of American history.
Can I just make one point to make sure that we don't erase Afro-Latinos, please, in this narrative, because they also deal with some of these things as well.
Greg Carr. Again, I think when you look at these numbers, what it says is that Black people, we are in a different category than anybody else. Our history is different. How we have been treated is different.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's interesting. Segregation, of course, we know persists. Residential segregation, segregation in the schools, segregation, even, as you say, even though being Black crosses across, the Black experience crosses in many ways across economic categories. This survey, as you said earlier, as just heard earlier, says, water is wet. We know that. And we also know that increased contact with people of other races is in many ways the first, second, and third step toward beginning to break down some of these clear errors in thinking from white people in particular. But we know that this country, in its economic system, its public policy, its cultural norms, has maintained and in many ways extended segregation. So when we ask what is the solution to this, and if the solution involves being in closer proximity to each other and dealing with each other more intimately, and I don't mean, in terms of just interpersonal relationships, but in terms of institutional relationships, there's not really a path forward. The other thing I would say, the one path that we do see is going to be inevitable as the demographics change, and as we know, the children in this country are already over 50% non-white. Ultimately, white people may keep these attitudes that they want, but they keep them at their own economic and political peril because their power is shrinking, not growing.
You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it Black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.